Let's see. Hi. Yeah, hi. Mike Laven of the Currency Cloud. It's a slightly depopulated out there. Argentina and Switzerland, perhaps. I'm not sure. When Wired called me and asked me if I would like to speak this afternoon, I said, do you want the usual? Which is unlimited demand, failing banking systems, creative disruption, and they said, well, everybody else is going to talk about that. So I ended up on the dark side, and I thought Keren did a very good job of starting us off in the dark side. And what I'm going to talk about is really what keeps me up at night, what it really goes on in a day in the life of a money transfer CEO. And I will say that while I've been here, I've done an informal survey of other money transfer CEOs, and there's a number of them who are here. I can't see if they're still here. They've gone off to watch football. And we've all sort of come up to roughly the same kinds of things that keep us up at night. So first, let me tell you a little bit what the Currency Cloud doesn't do. This is a young lady. She's leaving her home in Putney. She texts her Starbucks. She tells them that she's going to be there. When she gets to the Starbucks, the GPS signals the barista. The barista warms her coffee. She gets the coffee. It hits her mobile wallet. It gives her loyalty points. She gets it and she goes home. We don't do that. In fact, a lot of other people have told you that they do that, and I still can't get my head around that that's the culmination of the financial revolution. But what we do is we transfer money around the world. We started at 0 2 years ago. We're now at about $6 billion a year. By the end of the year, we'll be at $10 billion a year. We have hundreds of customers, hundreds of thousands of people behind that. You may have seen our customer Transferwise last week when they all took their clothes off in Liverpool Street Station. nohiddenfees.com. It was brilliant. We threatened them that we would destroy their business by our company taking our clothes off. And since we're infrastructure people who sell to business, we just didn't think that would be attractive at all. So why is it that we're in business? And there was a great study that came out in May from the McKinsey Global Institute. And it was on global interconnectedness. And in general, and it's funny, I haven't heard this come up in the course of the day at all. In general, when I talk in the money transfer business, people talk about people. That it's individuals sending money home to the Philippines or people sending money home to India. But in fact, the global growth in people going across borders is the slowest part of global interconnectedness right now. If you look at it, and they looked at flows over the last 10 years. So goods flow up 10 times, service flow 7 times, data flow up massively. Financial flows, flows in people. So what you have is a massive growth in interconnectedness on a global basis, underlain by a massive digital growth in media growth. And actually, if you look at the interconnected economy, the interconnected economy is about 30% of global GDP. So it's a massive growth. And if you were to look at the arrows in the charts, 10 years ago, that growth would have been, I guess what we used to say, north-north. Then it became north-south. Now it's south-south. So you've got a massive global infrastructure expanding 10x over the last 10 years. And nowhere in a 180-page study of global interconnectedness does it ever mention how anything gets paid for. It just sort of happens. Okay? And in fact, it just being paid for is sort of what we do at the Currency Cloud in trying to figure that out. And what we do is we pay bills for businesses. This is the self-promotional part. There's always got to be a self-promotional part. We pay bills for businesses, and we send money to, and that's Mo, if everybody remembered the whole thing in the UK with Barclays cutting off all the Somali remittances. We send money to people's families, or we provide infrastructure for people who do that. And now Keren mentioned an agency that I want to talk about. I spoke at a money transfer conference a couple of months ago. And here's a slide that was put up at the conference. And this is how they sort of measured our industry. They measured us from tier 1, part of a criminal network, to tier 4, trying. All right? And along the way, I could either be an opportunist or I could be negligent and incompetent. And so the presumption in the discussion, and you had 200 people in the room, all of whom moving money around the world, is that we lie somewhere between criminals and trying. And so when I talk to the CEOs in the business that I'm in, that is our daily interaction with the banks and with regulators. We're somewhere between criminals and trying. And when I deal with the junior people in their compliance businesses, and because it's generally junior people until you screw up, in which case you get over to the left, it's all about the presumption of guilt. And so in my business, we deal with the presumption of guilt. And you know, well, why is that? Okay, because I think what I'm doing is I'm sending money to these guys because that's what I do. But they actually think that I'm sending money to these guys in Latin America, or they think that we're sending money to these guys, or they really think we're sending money to these guys, or heaven forbid, they think we're sending money to these guys. And you have to see, on the bottom of every single communication I get from the compliance department of the bank is the justification that I'm not sending the money to Iran, to a whole series of countries. So there is a continual presumption of guilt. Okay, so why is that? And actually, it's fairly rational. And it's the rational part that's the hard part right now. Is if you think of the banking world that I deal in, the risk is asymmetric. And we take the asymmetric word from asymmetric warfare. But in asymmetric risk, I can make $1, but I can lose 10 billion. All right, so BNP might really have screwed up in sending money to Tehran from a Swiss subsidiary, which seemed to be regulated by, so French bank, Swiss subsidiary, money to Iran, regulated by the US regulator. But if you look at in the money transfer business that I deal with, Barclays or Bank of America or any other bank, they make that much. They make nothing. But if they screw up, their penalties and costs can be hundreds of millions of dollars. So how do you deal in a world with asymmetric risk? And I don't think that we understand how to do that yet, because the asymmetric risk isn't going to go away. That the banks will continually have pressure from the regulators, not make any money, and so suddenly the whole system sort of gums up, you know. It comes down. And I tried to think of, so what really is the problem? And this leaves me to actually do a book plug. I wanted to do a plug for Dave's book on digital identity management, because Dave was too polite to plug it for himself. But if you go back to what I was saying before, what's my problem? My problem is I have to daily, 1,000 times a day, figure out who the good guys and the bad guys are. And the tools that the banks give me, that infrastructure gives me, are just totally inadequate. I mean, we go through the, you know, one of the analogies is the analogy of airport security, where you spend the same amount of time frisking the grandmother in a wheelchair. Is that the absurdity, as Brett this morning talked about signatures going out of date. It's so hard for me to believe that in order to meet bank compliance, I'm still asking company directors for utility bills. Could anything be more absurd? I'm asking people for utility bills. You know,
we have very high security utility bills.
High security utility bills. You know, I can identify these people on social media. I can do 1,000 different things, but those things aren't. Or I get that I see these grainy passport photographs. So to go to the way Dave looked at it, that's their legal identity, and their legal identity is the easiest to face. Now this is serious. I mean, I am legitimately on the hook for that. I can't send money to those guys, and I invest a massive amount of time and money in our company meeting the compliance requirements of the bank. And also, there are no solutions out there that we've seen that are good enough. Okay, there's some people who look at companies. There's people who look at credit checking. There are a few companies that were trying to look at KYC in putting it together, but I gave those companies' databases to my technical people, and they broke them in about 10 minutes. So I need a way to, and this is to entrepreneurs because there's an opportunity. This is to regulators. I think collaboration is there. We have to sort of solve the digital identity problem. And I need to solve it in a way that's replicable. In other words, if I have to do it, remember, because in the OFAC list, if anybody know what that is, the list of the global bad guys, if you were a good guy on Tuesday, it doesn't mean you're still a good guy on Wednesday. So I have to do that list every single day. And when you're starting to do tens and thousands of those, then the constraint to solving the problem that I outlined before, which is a massive growth in interconnectedness. Remember, we're talking 30% of the global economy is interconnected, but there's no systems to make that stuff move smoothly. What it means for individuals and businesses, it means just high costs. You know, at Currency Cloud, we try to bring the cost down, but to the extent that we can't solve the global identity problem, you know, figuring out who are the good guys and the bad guys, we're never going to bring those costs down. Cloud helps. A very simple little cloud, but you know, everything as a service allows us and will allow all of our firms to get the kinds of security that we need, not to put it in-house, not to have high costs. There's firms in here who are selling various kinds of security solutions. We can put them together. We can make them, knit them together over the cloud and make them work in all kinds of services. And regulation, you know, I always used to look at regulation as my friend. Because after all, regulation to me, when I can figure it out with technology, creates a barrier to entry. So if I can figure out how to deal with regulation, then somebody else can't, and I can be there first. Also, regulation helps me with innovation, and to the extent it's real. Listen, consumer protection is real. Sending money to bad guys and not making sure we're sending it to them is real. But every day, I get, you know, so what we finally decided that we would have to do is, for our business, is to comply with the most stringent requirement of the most stringent regulator. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to screw up somewhere. So there is, you know, Level 39 is doing a good job of getting people to work in government policy. The banks are petrified. And so the regulation issue is not with regulators, because in fact the banks think the regulators are too soft. The issue is with banks. So there's an industry thing we can do, which is collaborating in groups, collaborating at 1139, bringing it to government to come back to do that. So sort of a day in life of the money transfer business CEO, yeah, it's all sun and roses. It's compliance. When I talk to the people who I deal with about what they do during the day, what they say they do is they do compliance. You know, that's our life. And we have to do it. There's massive opportunity. The global economy is expanding dramatically. I looked at three sort of ways out. One is identity management, and something that is thorough and technically driven. Two, cloud. There's a lot of cloud services we can get, people can develop. And third is to work with regulators. Those are the three ways out, but it's the dark side, and that's where we spend our time. Thanks.
So if you had the regulator on stage here, rather than me, and maybe the head of the Bank of England, and maybe the Home Secretary, what would you want from them?
So we've had that, actually. You want two things. Okay, in England, you want in England, you want more banks. Because England has the problem that because there are so few banks, there's not enough banking innovation, so you don't have challenger banks. So consequently, banks can rest on what they do because no one's challenging them. So that's secondly. The second thing that you want is clarity from the regulator. Because what the bank wants to say is, we can't tell you. So the bank wants to leave things indistinct so that they can always be in control. What you really want is more regulatory clarity on what to do. Listen, these are important problems. We can't send money to bad guys, and we spend a tremendous amount of effort doing it. But I think we spend a lot of that effort unfocused on the wrong issues where we could be much more focused and do a better job of it. So I would say more clarity from the regulator, and in England particularly, more challenger banks who are forcing innovation.
quick unrelated question.
Unrelated is always good.
Based on Keren's talk.
Yeah.
So if you're
She made me scared.
if you're transferring $7 billion,
If I'm transferring?
if you're transferring $7 billion
Yeah.
and
Right.
rising fast, how vulnerable do you feel your network is?
So we think about that all the time. And we have to, so I use a lot of the SWIFT network, I use the bank's networks themselves. So my network is really the bank's networks plus my internal network. And we have this whole series of data security standards that we have to be part of. And for us as a money transfer, it's sort of one of the reasons why it's a barrier to entry in our business. It's nice to think of yourself as a startup, but it's hard. You have to have the level of data security as a bank to be even to touch anything. We handle people's money. So the answer is, I don't think it's vulnerable. No, how to put it. I think I have the same level of vulnerability as my banking partners have. I don't know whether that's a good answer or not.
Keren will probably have an answer for you.
She'll have a better answer for me.
Thank you,
than that.
Mike Laven.
Thank you.